urban regeneration, infrastructure, mergers and acquisitions and probate. He is also currently the chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association's Institute of Continuing Legal Education. He has over 8 years post-qualification in private and public sector practice experience as a solicitor in England. Is no other person than the erudite Mr. Tobena Ewojibwe. The round of applause for him, please. Thank you very much. Also going to be on this panel with him is a legal consultant at the African Development Bank. He is an economic, monetary, and financial law specialist. Economic, monetary, and financial law specialist. Everything money. He graduated as the best graduating student of the Nigerian Law School 2015 set with a first-class honors and a second-class upper honors from the University of Jos, where he made distinctions in commercial law, international law, and the law of evidence. He is a former senior associate, finance and projects at the famous law firm of Templars. He was there between January 2016 and June 2022, and a former lecturer of corporate law and practice at the Nigerian Law School, Lagos campus. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Kenneth Oko. Round of applause for him, please. Also joining them is another. It's just that the committee did not do gender balance, but it's okay. We're talking money here. Money no sabi gender. Let's just get the money and talk about international trade. We have a senior associate in dispute resolution practice group, also of Templars, who holds a Master of Law degree in International Business Law from King's College London. He graduated with a first-class degree from Abia State University in 2010, after which he proceeded to Nigerian Law School and subsequently called to the bar. Prior to joining Templars, he was a key member of the dispute resolution team at 2 top commercial law firms in Lagos, where he gathered a decade's experience advising Nigerians and expatriate clients in diverse areas of Nigerian law, and regularly appearing on their behalf before trial and appellate courts, as well as arbitral tribunals in high-profile commercial and general civil disputes, covering a broad range of causes. His interests are international arbitration, international investment law, and private international law. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Oji Agu Uka. Round of applause. The icing on the cake to cap it all up for this panel is a gentleman who had an LLM in Cambridge, currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Norbase, a company building the digital infrastructure that empowers businesses to start, to scale, and to operate in any African country. He formerly served as the Assistant Chief Negotiator for Nigeria and Head Trade Remedies of the Nigeria Office for Trade Negotiations, NOTN, where he led portions of the technical negotiations for the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement between 2016 and 2018. He was also the technical advisor to the Nigerian President in the Office of the Vice President on Industry, Trade, and Investment. Please let's make welcome Mr. Adetola Onoyemi. Round of applause for him. Ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that there's energy on stage. And we're ready to set sail. And I'm going to hand over to the moderator of this session. He will give his opening remarks and then determine how this will go for the next 40-45 minutes. A round of applause for him. A round of applause for him.
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. Mr. Mr. President, immediate past president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Mr. Chairman of the Ikeja Bar, my brother Sheyi, the chairman of the Lorry Planning Committee, the Senior Advocate, Mr. Adediwe. It is my pleasure to be here. All protocols to be observed. So when we are invited to this kind of gathering and we are asked to tell people something about nothing or something about anything, it's always difficult. For me personally, it's about what impact we leave. So I always say, is there one thing we can do that everybody will remember beyond today? It's difficult to call. So I'm just going to ask that we demonstrate something. I listened to the brilliant presentations by the previous speakers, the mentors. And one thing that came out of it when the president was speaking was artificial intelligence. And I think that one word you would have to remember today and going forward is the word disruption. There are many disruptors. We talked about AI. The topic that we are discussing today, international trade, is going to be one of the most significant disruptors of all time. And so just to demonstrate the disruption that technology represents, I'm going to ask AI a question. Are you guys ready? Yeah? So there's a screen over there. I mean, how many people have used any form of generative AI in this room? How many people? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Okay, good. So we're going to use an AI tool that's called ChatGPT. Very peculiar to lawyers. I just want you to look at the screen. And because we're talking about international trade, we're going to talk about
trade and services. What would it take a Ghanaian lawyer to practice law in Nigeria? Can we ask ChatGPT that question? Move. Have you clicked? Okay. Okay, it's coming. I want you to watch the speed of that demonstration, right? Those who can read, read. But more importantly, just follow the speed of it. And I can tell you that when we print it out at the end of the day, you can read it and then you will actually appreciate the power of artificial intelligence and the power of the disruptors we are going to talk about today. So that's just one element. I mean, the first time I used ChatGPT, I told myself that we were in trouble. It reminded me of my days back in England when I was introduced to some case management systems. And those systems, when I used them, I found out I could interplay with all the libraries in the world, from Cambridge to Oxford to Harvard. It was so exciting doing research. But AI has taken it to the next level, because what it does is it uses algorithms to answer questions that human beings ordinarily will answer. Now, we're not yet there because it's not a perfect system yet. But I will say this to you, and everybody should think about it. We used to watch films when we were growing up, and they would tell you about somebody sitting down here, talking to somebody in America, seeing their video and all of that. And we thought it was all imagination. I would like you all to remember that the only thing a human being has not created is what he hasn't imagined. Once you imagine it, it will be created. And the challenge of law, I think, is to keep up the pace with creativity, innovation, technology, and human imagination. And now even AI imagination. Can you imagine that? So, distinguished colleagues, this afternoon I am privileged to have amongst the panelists some of the most distinguished young-ish lawyers in our profession. I mean, I've known Kenneth for a long time. Before he went on to Harvard, then Cambridge, now had a PhD from Cambridge. That's the kind of person, and he's come all the way from Abidjan, from the African Development Bank, to be here with us today. I think he deserves a round of applause. Ojoka also I've known from before he traveled around the world, went to King's College, came back, doing what he's doing, passionate about the young lawyer in Nigeria, passionate about sharing his knowledge, passionate about sharing, showing the direction that things should go. So Oji, thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you to them.
And then Tola is, I remember, I had a youth copper in my office, Dumebi, then went on to Cornell, and she practiced in America now. And she told me, she said, I just come back to Nigeria that year. And she said to me, there's a young man you must meet. The word must, a youth copper coming to your office and saying, you must meet this young man. I said, why? He said, you just need to meet him. So he brings Tola walks in, and then we had a conversation. I said, yes, indeed, I had to meet you. And then he's gone on to Cambridge. He's done so well. He was the assistant chief negotiator for the African Free Trade Agreement for Nigeria, as young as he is. And they're all below 12 years post-call. So it's remarkable that we have them here, and I'm grateful to them for being here. Now, the major disruptor we're going to be looking at today is trade, international trade. And I think that awareness is the most important thing in the world, because I always use the example of different revolutions in the world. Those who read about history, then they talk about the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, Bolsheviks. What happened was that those who had money, the power classes, were busy drinking champagne, eating cake, having fun, and then the revolution happened because they were not aware. The same thing is happening in the legal profession today. I sit on many committees of the bar where the only thing that is obvious is that disruption would happen. And as far as trade is concerned, for instance, one of the major disruptors in Europe is the European Union. Another disruptor in England is the Brexit. The Brexit has changed the color of England. In fact, when I get there, I don't even recognize it anymore. But it's not the change that is doing in England that is concerning us today because we're in Nigeria. It is that potentially that change, that exit from Europe, is actually going to affect the legal profession in Nigeria. What is it that is doing? There's a negotiation ongoing now between the British government and the Nigerian government. And the British government is insisting that there has to be mutual recognition of qualifications for legal practitioners, which means that there's a big lobby for European lawyers, English lawyers especially, to practice in Nigeria. You can imagine what that means. And then some will say, oh, we won't allow it. But then a bigger question, in the work that we do at the Institute of Continuing Legal Education, I talk to people around, like the NLNG, like Local Content Board, like different government agencies about work for Nigerian lawyers. And what they tell me, and that's how we started collaborating with NLNG, they said to me the other day, if we're talking about energy transitions, how many Nigerian lawyers do you have? If we're talking about digital transitions, how many Nigerian lawyers do you have? If we're talking about all carbon emissions and all of that, how many Nigerian lawyers do you have that have the expertise in those areas? And so the conclusion is that I consider it unfortunate that we graduate too many lawyers every year, but not because of the numbers. It is because of the quality of training that they get. Too many lawyers in a class. I mean, Kenneth, somebody was telling me the other day in Enugu that they still use Kenneth's notes at the law school. How many years ago did he leave? So we need to think creatively and be there to confront the challenges that are going to hit us, whether we like it or not. So WTO, the African Free Trade Agreement, the European Treaty of Rome, and all the various trade relationships that we have. It's simply a question of how do I trade in another country? What are the rules that regulate trade between two countries? Recently, the tax authorities in Nigeria started taxing. They brought in what they call digital taxation, taxing digital operations in Nigeria, because they found out that a lot of activity goes on that's under the radar. So we can say that a non-UK lawyer cannot practice, a non-Nigerian lawyer cannot practice in Nigeria. But I can call my friend who is a solicitor in England and say, listen, can you do this, do that? You can ask ChatGPT 2 questions about Nigerian law. Know where to go and do his research. Come back, do it, give it to the other guy. Will that contract not regulate the agreements? So whichever way you like it, you must be equipped to be competitive. So today, there are two things I think we are aiming to achieve. One is to give you some introduction into what trade law is all about, international trade law is all about. So you have a foundational knowledge. You can't take too much, but enough to form an interest. But I think the second element of it, which is even deeper and more crucial, is knowing how those treaties, those agreements, that order affects your everyday life as a lawyer. What are the challenges that it portends? But more importantly for me, which is why I am here, is what are the opportunities in them. I was happy when I listened to Leonard Silk when he talked about what a lawyer should do, and that is traditionally what it will never change. But if you are ignorant of the pace of law, the fact that now you have AI law. How do we have AI law? You have all kinds of different laws. You have new styles of things happening all over the world. So trade law, I would just say, is about trade, services, works, intellectual property, and how it is regulated in a world that is becoming increasingly globalized, liberalized, and cross-border transactions take place every day. Thank you very much. I had chosen to stand up to address you because my brother, the immediate past president, said he cannot sit down to address members of Ikeja Bar. So thank you very much. I'll now take my seat. So I'll now be calling on Tola to give us an overview of international trade law with special emphasis on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is an area that he has first-hand knowledge of and actually worked very hard to bring into place. Tola.
Thank you very much. First, I'd say I'm really happy to be here. I'm actually, I think I'm part of the Ikeja Bar by registration. So it's exciting to be here. When Egbonolu told me of the dates, I definitely had to clear my schedule and ensure that I was here to talk and spend some time with a family that I care a lot about. Now, I don't know if my mic is good. Okay, it's better now. So I'll spend a bit of the next few minutes talking about international trade law and just trying to give a lot of pictures and trying to give like descriptions, right? So, and I'll give a bit of context of how I came into international trade law. I was about, without disclosing, I was about 23, 24, right? I finished Cambridge 2 years before, and a friend of mine had just gotten appointed by his country's president as an advisor. And it was basically an issue of saying, see, I need clarity on how we can create prosperity in my country, right? You've written a thesis on international trade law, come help. And so basically I was flown down to the capital and I was having conversations with the government to say, this is how you should think about designing your policy. Now, but what international trade law is at its core is how do you use the rules to set out how countries do business amongst themselves, right? So meaning I want to buy goods across borders, I want to buy services across borders. How do you create the rules that determines that? And this is as old as you can get, right? When you start to think of it, in fact, when you think of the agreements that designed the global economic system, there's something called the Bretton Woods institutions, the three big agreements. The first one is the agreement creating the International Monetary Fund, which now is linked to the World Bank, right? But the second one is the GATT agreement. It's called the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. And what that agreement basically does is this. Now, before you start getting into detail of that agreement, for the longest time, the rule used to be that I would make it hard for you to sell in my country. So, and you see it a lot today when you hear of things like border closure, when you hear of things like I'm charging a customs duty at the border. That's historically how trade was designed. The idea is, I'm the lord and master of my border. If you want to bring anything into my country, you need my permission, and I will charge you for getting access. That's the traditional trade. And for the longest time, that's how trade was done. The United Kingdom, for the longest time, was one of the most protected economies in the world. The US, for the longest time, was one of the most protected economies in the world. Now, around the time when the Second World War had ended, and they were beginning to think about creating the Bretton Woods organizations, one of the big conversations was, what should global trade start to look like? And the argument was simple. If I'm good at making chairs, and Orji is good at making caps, and my guy, Mr. Tobena, is good at making suits. If we all say, you know what, I will charge extreme high tariffs at the border, we all suffer. Because what will happen is that I'll make good shoes, but when I need caps, it will tell me, before you can sell your shoes in my country, pay me 50%. Then he'll say, oh, and then I'll do the same thing to him. So who's suffering? The citizens. Caps get more expensive, shoes got more expensive, coats get more expensive. And so this argument of free trade began to say, what if we created a regime that says, you know what, I'll make it easier for you to trade. We agree on the standards. We say things like, you know what, if we all agree on these rules together, these are the minimums of what you can do on these kind of things. And that's how trade started. It started with the GATT agreement. In 1995, we created the WTO agreement, which is the World Trade Organization agreement, which, by the way, is one of the most powerful organizations in the world today. And Okonjo-Iweala heads that organization today. And so, over time, what's happened is that we progressively have made more rules on how trade should happen. And the idea is that and it's that we make more money if we deal together. If I say, get access to my market, and you say, get access to my market, we just make more money. But trade rules are also more complicated. It's things like, if you bring a product into my country, at what point does it constitute dumping? If you sell at the price in my country, at what point is it wrong? So trade rules starts to underpin the entire, and what I like to say is, I say trade rules are so foundational because it underpins the entire global trading system. All of global prosperity has been made from trade. And in fact, when you look at how much the global GDP has increased, it's been a function of trade. And in fact, you can tie the prosperity of any country to how much trade it does. The world's number one, and I'm going to debunk a bunch of troublesome things today. The reason why Nigeria cares a lot about currency and dollar exchange rate is because we don't do enough trade. Right? Because if you did more trade, you actually want your currency to be weaker. Right? Because, for instance, so China is constantly devaluing their currency because they want to trade. Because if my currency is weaker, it means in the global market, my price of my product is cheaper, which means it's more competitive. And so what's that? And that's why the knowledge of trade law matters, because it informs all your policy. There's some, I like to call them vanity metrics, where you pat yourself on the back and say, I have a strong currency. But that's not how it works. I'll give an example. Today, dollar to naira in the black market is about what? 750. South Korea, it's 1,300 won to $1. However, South Korea is 6 times the GDP of Nigeria. So it's not about the same. Your argument should not be, should my exchange rate get higher? Your argument should be, I want to earn more from the global economy. Today, the global economy is 100 trillion. The US alone is 1/4 of the global economy. The US alone is 25 trillion. Right? China is next. China is 19 trillion. Nigeria is 500 billion. Nigeria is 0.5% of global GDP. 0.5%. However, in population, Nigeria is closer to, population is 8 billion. Nigeria is about 250. Nigeria is almost 5% of global GDP, of global population. It doesn't work. And so what trade rule says is, how should we organize a way to ensure that we can make more prosperity by ensuring that we get more market access? And I'll tell you a very interesting story about how powerful trade law can be. When South Africa was coming out of apartheid, right? South Africa was trying to negotiate, because South Africa had been cut off from global trade when they were coming out of apartheid. South Africa was trying to negotiate rules of saying, I want access, I want people to sell and buy again. Now, a particular country that I will not mention, South Africa went to negotiate with this country, and South Africa said, I want access to your market, sign the agreement. And he said, you know what, now, when you go and negotiate these things, what usually will happen is you say, you know what, for rice, I will charge you 10% customs. You will charge me 10%. It's reciprocity. But what this country said, you know what, on all the trade you want to do, we'll give you 0%. Bring all your goods in. On one condition, let's negotiate rules of origin. What are rules of origin? Rules of origin basically say, at what point can you say a product has been actually produced in your country? E.g., a car. When I bring a car into Nigeria, at what point do you say this is a Nigerian car? Is it because the metal came from Nigeria? Or is it because the tire came from Nigeria? Or is it because the spare parts came from Nigeria? How much transformation must happen in the product for you to say it's a Nigerian product? That's rules of origin. And so this country said, let's negotiate rules of origin. We'll bring out the trading. South Africa was excited. They signed all the agreement, done. Now, the first problem. South Africa says, you know what? We want to sell the cars to you. They said, oh, those cars you want to sell, they are not South African cars. The rules of origin we agreed on South African cars is 90% has to originate from South Africa. And so because it does not, this car is not a South African car. You can't sell it to my market. And that's how knowing the details of trade rules can ensure you create prosperity for your country and even your clients. I have times when I was working in Geneva, King & Spalding, we represented most of the biggest US law firms. And one of the things that happen is US law firms, US industry groups will come and say, I want to get access to the Nigerian market. What do I need to do? And you help them design trade rules that ensure that they can get access to the market. What does it look like? What do I need to do to sell in that market? And so what I'm trying to say is that in a world where we're constantly getting interconnected, in a world where we're creating more prosperity, global GDP today is 100 trillion. My bet is that over the next year, it's going to become 200 trillion. That 200 trillion is created by people buying, people selling. Today, what my company does is ensure that from one single digital platform, you can register a company, get compliant in every country around the world from one website. And the bet is that progressively, we're going to do more trade in the world. Trade barriers are going to come down. And that means that if you want to understand how the globe works, if you want to be able to advise your clients and help them make a lot of money, you need to know trade law. You need to know how money flows between countries. You need to know about balance of payments. You need to know about how exchange rates. For instance, one of the reasons why I'm not called the name. One of the big telcos had a problem in Nigeria. It's called exchange rate problems. What does taking a loan in dollars but having to pay but earning in naira mean? You need to know the details of what trade law means for you as a client. E.g., at what point can I charge VAT on exported services? At what point can I advise a client? Today, almost all the big tech companies you shout about in Nigeria are not even Nigerian companies. Why? Because their holding companies are set up in the US, Delaware. You need to understand the nitty-gritty of that. But also in the sense of the fact that the world is fast moving. Today, one of the big things people are talking about is single market economies. What does that mean? How can I register in one country and have access to the entire continent? Today, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania are making strong bids to become the single point of access to the whole continent. Kenya, I was with the president of Kenya some days ago, and one of the big arguments they were making was they want to ensure that every African that comes to do business can get into Kenya without paying for a visa. There's something called Silicon Tanzania that exists today. There is what's happening. And so there's this big push towards that. But that's the underpinning of trade law. It's basically how do countries trade amongst themselves, but more importantly, how do the companies and the businesses in those countries get goods and services across from each other? That's the general big basics.
Tola, I didn't expect anything less. You've broken it down very simply. You've given us a background about the origins of trade law, and you've given us the ABC of trade law. And I think that sets the foundation for where we're going next. Now, I'd like to go to Kenneth, who has also done a lot of work in the trade space. Kenneth likes financing transactions across countries. Kenneth, can you talk a bit more about the African Free Trade Agreement? Talk about the financing issues that we're likely to see going forward. And then I would like you to talk, because it's always important that we think about our audience when we're talking. And going forward, we'll just be looking at the everyday Ikeja lawyer, the everyday Ikeja young lawyer. How do these things affect?
Thank you very much, and hello everyone. The AFCFTA is an agreement that Tola participated in midwifing. It essentially aims to create a single market across Africa eventually, what we like to call an internal market. Right now, it's along the lines of a free trade area. The more we work on it, it will become a common market. And I'm using this term specifically so that when you're reading, because one of the things I would advise you to do after this is to improve your competence in this space, and you do that by reading a lot. So when you see these terms, when you start reading, you know they mean different things. Right now, it's a free trade area in the making. It will become a common market eventually. Then hopefully one day, a single or an internal market as they have in the EU. And what that simply means is that the same way you can walk into a shop in Lagos mainland and buy something without having to go through any regulations or having to think about technical barriers or what the standards are in that market, you can do the same across the continent. And if you're producing goods in Nigeria or in Ghana or in Rwanda or in Lesotho, you can put those goods on a shop or display window in Egypt or in Morocco or in Tunisia without having to deal with internal regulatory concerns because the standards have been harmonized. That's what an internal market does for you. And that's what the AFCFTA hopes to achieve across the continent. Why is it important? It's important because, as Tola has said, countries become prosperous by trading. And if you look at the data, intra-African trade is less than 15%. Intra-ECOWAS trade, that's within West Africa, over the past 20 years has been between 8 and 12%. So West African countries particularly trade more with Europe than we trade with ourselves. And this is when you look at official data. If you look at unofficial data, it shows slightly different color, particularly along the borders. But when you look at official data, you find that Nigeria trades more with Europe than it does with its neighbors, right? Cape Verde, which is a West African country, does 90% of its trade with Europe, practically nothing with its West African neighbors. And Cape Verde is also a member of the ECOWAS, a member of the AFCFTA. So you see, we are not going to be prosperous if we do not learn how to trade with ourselves. If you do a comparative analysis and look at the EU, intra-EU trade is about 70%. If you look at the Americas under NAFTA, intra-America trade is about 68%. If you look at Southeast Asia under the ASEAN, their trade is above 50%. So these countries trade amongst themselves, and because they trade within an enclosed area, transport costs are lower, logistic costs are lower, and so the prices of goods and services for themselves are lower. But because we go to Europe to look for our own goods, or we go to China to look for our own goods, we pay higher transport costs, we spend a lot of money in getting goods and services, and then our trade deficit increases. We're looking for dollars every time. So the AFCFTA is trying to change that, to put Africa back on the path to prosperity. And it's just one of those projects. The AFCFTA is the biggest one so far. There are many such projects on the continent. You have one within the EAC, that's the East African Community. You have one within the COMESA. You have one within the SADC, that's down Southern Africa. You have one in the ECOWAS. You have one with the CENSAD. You have one with the MRU, the Conseil de l'Entente. There are several free trade arrangements across the continent. And the hope is that one day we'll get all of these things right, and then the continent will be more profitable. Tola works on the trade side of things. Now, every trade has two sides because it's an exchange. You're exchanging goods and services for money, right? So you don't have one without the other. Now I work on the other end. My work primarily focuses on how to make trade efficient, and efficiency comes from payments. How do you make payments for the goods or the services you're buying? Because if you remove the barriers to trade, but you don't remove the barriers to payments, you have a big problem. And this has happened before. In the 1970s, just around the time the ECOWAS was created, we used to have something called, created 2 months before the ECOWAS actually, the West African Clearing House. Now it was established to clear trades amongst West African countries and make sure that payments were made and payments were efficiently made. But because we did not have the rules for trade, as Tola has rightly described, Nigeria, for example, didn't route trade in oil through that mechanism. Ghana kept their cocoa to themselves. Countries kept their most important foreign exchange earners to themselves. And the West African Clearing House died, even though it was meant to make sure payments were effective. So the work I do is trade facilitation from a payments perspective, making sure that there is first a multilateral payment system, which is what I worked on when I did some research at the IMF, making sure there's a multilateral payment system, avoiding bilateralism, and to the extent possible, having a multipolar currency world where countries can trade efficiently using currencies that are readily available to them. And then within the continent, the work I'm doing again is one market, one money, right? If you look at the history of trading or trade integration in Europe, they started first with coal and steel, incremental, and that's a problem I have with Africa anyways. Trade integration is usually incremental. You start small and then you go big. In Africa, we start big and then we begin to figure out the nuts and bolts of it all. So in Europe, they started with coal and steel, and then they went to economic integration, and then they went to monetary integration to make sure that trade was efficient amongst themselves. And the slogan, the cliche then, was one market, one money. Because if you have one market, using Africa as an example, if the AFCFTA today becomes an internal market, a single market for the continent, the first problem you would have is that we have 40 currencies, right? Every country has theirs. We have 8 West African countries sharing one, 5 Central African countries sharing one, so that knocks off about 13 countries from the 55. Comoros shares the same currency with them. Then within the SADC, they all have their currencies pegged to the South African rand. So you have about 40 currencies. Now, if you're in Nigeria and we have a common market, you want to pay for goods or services in Burundi, right? You have your Nigerian naira. You need to go and look for the currency in Burundi to pay them. You now have transaction costs. The cost of exchange, the time you spend looking for who has the Burundi's currency to exchange, to give to you. And because that would be difficult, you now choose to trade in USD, right? So that's the 41st, or the euro, the 42nd, or the pound, the 43rd, or increasingly the Chinese yen, the 44th currency. So you have 44 currencies operating in one market. It makes no sense, right? Europe had this problem, and they solved the problem by ensuring that one market, one money. Now that's the work I'm doing, right? So on every side of for every trade, there are two sides. There's making sure the trade happens. There's making sure the payment happens, right? So if you're thinking of developing your skills, developing yourself in this space, it's wide enough, right? If you can't figure out, if you're not smart like Tola to figure out how trade policy works, you can join the rest of us who are struggling to figure out how the money works, because everybody understands money, right? So that is, in very simple terms, what the AFCFTA is trying to do. It's the first flagship project under the Agenda 2063, the African Economic Community, the plan to integrate the continent. On the back of that, we now have the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, which hopes to make payments a little easier under that market. And then, increasingly, most countries are now developing their real-time gross settlements to connect to that system. So how does this affect, which is the third leg of the question, how all of these things, how do they affect what we do every day as lawyers, right? You're practicing here in Ikeja or anywhere in the country, really. How does this affect you? It affects you in very significant ways. First, your friend who trades and wants to expand or take the benefit of the expanding markets, right? Make sure their goods are available in stores outside Nigeria. They'd come to you for advice on how they can do that, right? If they would have to enter into a supply agreement with somebody in Eswatini, you should be competent enough to write a contract for them, or at least provide guidance on how they can write that contract. My sense is you'd get paid for that, right? Now, to transport those goods and services from Nigeria, those goods particularly, if we're talking commodities now, to transport those goods from Nigeria to Eswatini, which is down south, maybe by road, if we have the infrastructure, we don't have the infrastructure yet, by air, those contracts will be written by somebody. If you're skilled in that, you would write that contract, and my sense is you'd get paid for it, right? When payment is going to be made, usually these kinds of trade, we have something called a letter of credit. Somebody facilitates that. If you facilitate that, my sense is you get paid for it. So at every turn, as a lawyer, there's an opportunity to get paid for the knowledge you have. So the question is, do you have that knowledge, right? And that is what my sense of this session is, to make you see that this is a space that is profitable, that this is a space that is available to you, that this is a space you can develop competence in without necessarily stressing yourself, and this is a space you can potentially earn very well from, as Tola, I suspect, is doing now, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kenneth. Always a pleasure to be on a panel with you. I think we're now getting to the more practical side of things. But before we get there finally, I'll ask Oji to make some comments. But my big takeaway, and I want you all to remember this for stage 2 that we're going to get into after Oji makes his introductory remarks, is that the convergence that we are waiting to see is the kind of convergence that you have in the EU, and that's big. And when we talked about this at some other conversation, and I talked about convergence of the EU market, Kenneth and Co started laughing. You know, they're the trade guys, meaning that we haven't even achieved the type of convergence trade-wise that was anticipated by those who wrote the Rome Treaty that established the EU itself. So I'll just go to Oji very quickly. Oji, you are a dispute resolution lawyer and you operate in the trade space. Can you give us an insight into how dispute resolution is regulated within the trade space, and then talk a bit about the kind of work
that lawyers have as a result of either bilateral agreements or multilateral agreements or the effect of the World Trade Organization on the everyday market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobina. Before I start, I want to ask two questions. If you don't mind, it's to you. Just show by wave of hand. Now, how many of us here do only dispute resolution? So whether it's litigation or arbitration, only dispute, that's all you do. Even if it's one person in the room, okay. So
Say,
all of
only court you dey go.
only if you do only litigation, can I see your hands up, please? Okay, since I was coming to Ikeja, I was expecting to see more dispute resolution practitioners. So it means that we're in the right room. I do disputes, okay? When I started out doing only dispute, and I used to see my friends, Kenneth, Donna, speak the fancy English, I asked myself, am I sure? Am I sure I've not shortchanged myself? So when I went to do my master's, I decided not to do disputes. I said I was going to do a master's in international business law. So one day I attended an event at White and Case, and I spoke to someone who does disputes. And I asked him, we're talking about green bonds, derivatives, why are you doing dispute? And he said to me, don't let them confuse you. There is still a lot you can get from doing disputes and be relevant. So it's like being proud of your color. I thought I was self-motivating, but when he said that to me, I said to myself, thank God I had not chosen my modules. So even though I did international business law, by the time you saw the modules I chose, they were dispute resolution. So where is international business litigation or international investment arbitration or international commercial arbitration, it was still dispute I did. And I have no regrets, even though I don't speak the fancy English they speak, I'm still in a space where I have that awareness of a bit of what you are doing. And I know, Mr. President said earlier that people are waiting for Dangote and his people to quarrel. Fortunately, they will quarrel at some point. Okay? Now, my second question, how many of us studied conflict of laws in school? Conflict of laws. People used to be afraid of that. Okay, so that's about, or private international law, and that fancy name for it. The same thing, okay? Now, let me tell you something, okay? We are in an area of harmonization. We're in an area where the boundaries are coming down. So you might have studied in Nigeria, you might work in Nigeria, but increasingly, you will be seeing contracts. You'll be seeing disputes over contracts involving people from more than one country. So that is really what conflict of laws is about. There are three major questions that conflict of laws answers. One, in the event of a dispute arising from a cross-border contract, by cross-border contract I mean a contract between at least two persons people from at least two countries, so right, two or more countries. When those disputes arise, the question is, which of the courts or which of the national legal systems would you approach? That's the first question. And typically, those who draft contracts well and know that the parties involved are from two countries or more will be smart enough to insert a clause in there that says in the event of a dispute, parties will go to arbitration, or in the event of a dispute, parties have agreed that their dispute will be regulated by, first of all, they will say the governing law of this contract shall be English law, or Chinese law, or Japanese law, or Nigerian law, or that a dispute arising under this agreement shall be resolved exclusively by English courts, or exclusively by Nigerian courts. So the first question is, that contract, what is the governing law? Two, if a dispute arises, which legal system, which courts will have jurisdiction over that dispute? The truth is that when you don't have all these provisions, that is the first challenge. So you have a dispute, you don't know which of the court will resolve it. So one person goes to another country because a claimant wants to go to a place he's comfortable. You don't want to stay in Aba and, let me use Ikeja. You don't want to stay in Ikeja and your client is in Ikeja and gets into a contract with a supplier from Taiwan. And then you want, if a dispute arises, you will then travel to Taiwan to go and file an action. You want to file it here. But lo and behold, the person there does not want to come to Nigeria because he doesn't trust your courts. So he wants to stay there. So either of you, whoever goes to court first, would file first. And then the second person is now faced with, should I go there and defend the case or should I not? You take a chance and you don't defend, the person gets judgment against you. The next question is, will Nigerian courts enforce that judgment? Do you have assets in another country that they can rely on? So these are questions that arise every day. When some of us chose conflict of laws, it wasn't because I was smart, it's because I liked the lecturer. Some did not choose, some didn't do conflict because they felt it would reduce their CGPA. Unfortunately, you can no longer run away from it. This is 2021. So this is 2023. We're in the 21st century. That's what I meant to say. We're in the 21st century, and you would increasingly see contracts involving parties from more than one country. And even if you don't want to see it, the AFCFTA has now made it mandatory that we would have disputes. A Nigerian, as Kenneth mentioned, can stay in Nigeria and contract with someone from South Africa. And those questions will arise. So I want you to understand that if you are doing disputes, you are not necessarily shortchanged. I encourage you, read trade law. Know about the finance aspects. Even if all you do is disputes, the time will come when you are called upon to act for a client, to advise a client, to try to avoid dispute arising, and if the event that you cannot solve those disputes, guide a client through the process of having his dispute resolved in an efficient way, so that you end up in the right court and not the wrong court, so that you apply the correct law, not the wrong law, so that if you have a judgment, you know where that judgment will be enforced. That is basically the dispute aspect of it. And to answer to the last question, under the AFCFTA, for example, that hasn't been resolved yet. The question of dispute, and it's unfortunate, but I guess we'll get there one day. In the EU, they have this system, and again, I'll be honest with you. When I chose to do international business litigation, I didn't even know what it was about until I got into the class. And then I learned that in the EU, they have what they call judgment regulations, lyrical judgment regulations, that has answered the question. So they have one regulation that determines where it is like the rules, it's in a hierarchy. If a dispute arises in the EU now, everybody knows which of the courts. I'm talking about the disputes between people from at least two countries. So take away the UK now. So let's say France and Germany. If a dispute arises in the EU, that regulation tells you which court has jurisdiction. It tells you which law will be applied, and also ensures that countries in the EU mutually enforce each other's judgments. So they have it there, and it's really the best in the world, if we are being honest. We expect that in the AFCFTA, in the African Union, we're going to have something similar. We're not there yet. So 3 potential disputes would arise going forward. 1, a tariff dispute or a trade dispute between Nigeria and Ghana, or between South Africa and Eritrea, or between Morocco and Tanzania. It will arise. So the AFCFTA currently contains a dispute settlement mechanism as between those two countries, or as between two countries in the African Union. The second level of dispute that will arise will be a dispute between an investor or a tradesman or a business person in one country having a dispute with another country. So a Nigerian who goes to Zambia to do business gets into a dispute with the Ghanaian government based on, for example, as you mentioned, bilateral investment treaty between Nigeria and Zambia, if there is any. The question will arise, a dispute will arise, and then which of the courts or which of the systems will you use to solve that dispute? And then for me, the third and most important layer of dispute is the one that will arise between private individuals or businesses or companies in the African Union. Believe it or not, the World Bank has a dispute resolution settlement system. And there are very few hundreds or thousands of disputes that are arisen under that system, because it's not all the time that Nigeria wants to go to war. By war, I mean financial war with Ghana or US or Brazil. So they will use diplomatic means to solve them. So there are not too many disputes that will arise. The major disputes will be disputes that will arise as between businesses in those different countries. And as a Nigerian lawyer, you must be equipped. You must know enough to advise your client so that when that dispute arises, as I said earlier, you can answer those 3 questions. Which law will apply? Which court will have jurisdiction? And will the judgment be enforced? Thank you.
I just want to say something very quickly. We had a young man called Ayo who was going to be on this panel. He missed his flight, so he wasn't here. And Oji just came in to listen, and we said, Oji, come on board, you take this position, and you've seen what it is for a human being to be prepared all the time to know his onions. And I think that's the kind of legacy we want to leave. So we're not going to get into and I thank you, Oji. Whilst our past president, Mr. Abata, is busy dealing with Dangote at the moment and trying to make sure that there are no disputes, Oji is busy praying that he makes some mistakes so that there will be dispute. And that is the beauty of it all. I got an email from the Bar Council. This is actually very funny. I got an email from the Bar Council of England and Wales. Mr. Chairman, ICLE, I want you to collaborate with us on a training. What is the training about? Well, you know, the Law Society in England, because England has solicitors and barristers. The Law Society in England, a lot of them are doing a lot of businesses in Nigeria. But we need to work with Nigerian lawyers to stop them. We need to work with let's train Nigerian lawyers on how to stop the solicitors from stealing their work. These are all English people. So you see that even within the local trade legal space, we have competition. And all we're talking about here is competition. So between Oji and the immediate past president, we are looking to see who will win. But so now we're getting to the second point. And the two things we're going to do now is we're going to look at where the work is. Where is the work for the lawyer? So Tola will tell us, he's a policy and business expert. He will tell us where the work is. Oji will tell us where the work is in the dispute space. Kenneth has already spoken a bit about it, but we want him to elaborate a bit more. Then once we are done with that, we will now ask the question that I find I learned to ask after attending almost all the ICLE trainings that we've done, my misfortune. But you know, at the end of each session, somebody will ask, so how do I start doing this thing that you're telling me? Yeah? And I think that is the question that we are all waiting to ask. So before we get there, Tola, your experience having worked with the government of Nigeria, having worked with many international organizations, having worked in policy, what exactly do you do? What is the work for the lawyer? And you don't need to stop there. If there are other things you've come across people doing that represents opportunities, that represents something that people can build competencies and skills in, then I think you should talk about it. I just want to make a quick point here, and I'm working with Kenneth and a few others on something that Kenneth termed JAPA. I said, no, that will cause confusion. What is this thing about? It's about the fact that it's a borderless world. We have a lot of lateral hires going on now. American firms are hiring Nigerians without qualification. British firms are hiring. So Olu now in their firm, they are very careful who signs off any email to anybody. So Oji can write, and then they get somebody else to sign it off, the person they want to go to America. So that when the Americans come, they don't take the brightest minds in Nigeria. But it's really going on. And as far as we're concerned, as long as Nigerian lawyers develop themselves, equip themselves, it doesn't matter where they go, they will come back. It doesn't matter where they go, their money will come back. It doesn't matter where they go, they will be better, and this country will be better for it, and they will create more opportunities. What we do not want to see going forward is a situation where in our constitution, the constitution of the NBA, we still have the word welfare, which presumes that we're hungry, which presumes that we're handicapped. All we want to keep talking about is empowerment, and this is what this session is about. Empowerment of Nigerian lawyers. So, Tola, please tell us about what you do and the business in that space and what lawyers you do. Thank you.
Hello, yes. Fundamentally, I ensure that countries can create more prosperity through trade rules, fundamentally. Now, that usually stares out into 3-4 kind of things, right? It could be policy work, which means I'm advising a government or a regional economic group like ECOWAS or an international organization or donor body like USAID, whatever it is. I'm advising on saying, listen, this is how you design the rules to look. For instance, now I'm leading the negotiations. I'm supporting the negotiations there's a design for the digital trade protocol for the African continent on the back of the AFCFTA. It's supposed to be this mechanism that ensures that you can do actual digital trade, so all your tech companies and all that. So I'm putting that. I'm working on that with the member states of the AFCFTA. So that's like a broad stroke. And for that, a lot of it is policy work, a lot of it is understanding the rules, and a lot of it is also being willing to read a lot and just handle a lot of information, right? A lot of it's also willing to like speak to people and understand, because a lot of it's also, trade law is where politics and economics meet. Because what happens is, a government says things like, I don't want to give anybody access to my country. It's a political issue, right? And then there's also trade rules of how do I reflect my economic and political objectives through the rules that I design, right? And that also means a lot of data, meaning how do you understand numbers, how do you make decisions using numbers, all those kind of things. And the second big broad, which is even bigger, which is advising industry groups, right? So for instance, Dangote today, we've mentioned him because I'll just use him because it's an easy example. He has a cement factory in a bunch of African countries. He also is now refining, he's also finished a refinery. He's going to try to export that across the world. The big question becomes, how do I ensure that I am not cut off from a market? How do I ensure that the Kenyan government does not pass a law that says I can't sell my refined crude in Kenya? So a lot of that work is private sector work. In fact, the biggest bulk of work in trade law is actually, so they're big, when you look at some of the biggest law firms in the world, right? And the reason is also because sometimes governments have no incentive to sue somebody. The government can say something like, you know what, I agree, for instance, e.g. rice. Today, a lot of smuggled rice comes into Nigeria from like neighboring countries. The government can say, you know what, it's too much stress. What happens in places like the US is industry groups like that have an interest will say, you know what, we'll sponsor the litigation, right? They'll come together, get a big law firm, and they'll collect a charter from the government to go prosecute on behalf. So that's a big group also of work that happens where and I did that a lot of time with King and Spalding when I was in Geneva, where you're basically advising private sector groups on either how to formulate policy for themselves or to protect their markets and all those kind of things more broadly. I think a third cadre of the work that exists is work around actual trade policy, trade negotiation. Now, this is not policy, this is an agreement. That's an example of the AFCFTA agreement that I worked on, where basically we're saying, you know what, there are 4 African countries, there's an AFC secretariat, there's a diaspora. How do we design a single agreement that makes it easy to do business across the continent? That would mean, and an example also is the digital trade protocol I'm talking about, where you're talking to member states, you're drafting the base document, you're getting consultations with them, you're taking all the inputs, and you're building into a big biz agreement. For that to happen, you need to get a lot of context about international trade law work, the history. And the reason is because when you start to do a trade agreement, there's a lot of interwoven issues. Nigeria, for instance, has obligations under the WTO. Nigeria also has obligations under the ECOWAS Treaty. Nigeria also has obligations under bilateral treaties. Bilateral treaties are treated between 2 countries that we sign. Nigeria also has with some agreements with the EU, right? So the question is, now every agreement you negotiate restricts your policy space. What's policy space? Policy space is how much freedom you have to do what you want. So normally Nigeria can say, you know what, I don't want you to bring rice into my country. But because you have signed WTO agreement, you can't do that. Because the WTO agreement says you cannot restrict your market from another WTO member state. So a lot of trade agreement negotiation means you need to know how all those, we call it the spaghetti bowl problem. The idea is that all the agreements intertwine each other like a spaghetti. They're just always intertwined. And so you need to navigate all those things carefully. That's like a third cadre of work. And a fourth cadre of work is actually what I call implementation work. It's things like, and there's also a lot of money to be made there. My startup actually does a lot of work there where you help people set up in different African markets, help them get compliant. And a lot of big law firms today make money on that, right? Some of the biggest tech companies you think about make a lot of money from just opening market access, right? How do you navigate things like, how do I have one payment agreement and can access all the markets and all that? Now, but there are 3 or 4 things that I'll also draw important strokes on. The first is this. Humans are incredibly smart. And so because humans are incredibly smart, we would always evolve new ways of doing trade. For instance, a few years ago, if you wanted to make payments, you needed to take the cash and send it down. Then move from that to saying you can send a check down. Then move from that to saying you can do a switch transfer down. Now, you can just hold the wallet and send money to almost any country in the world. As technology advances and as new things are formed, what starts to happen is that trade law also, and even law generally, will evolve. Law follows patterns of human behavior. For instance, one big question, and it's an interesting thing, is there's an argument now. I can build an AI and train it to act like a person, to act like a customer service agent. Now, what happens if my AI that I built finds a customer in another person's country and then designs a trade transaction and sends it down? Who is liable? Is it me that designed the AI, or is it the AI itself, or is it the company? So there's, and why I say this is simple. Too many times we spend too much time thinking about what has even been formed. But what I'm calling out to say is to say, one thing where you have an advantage is what has not even been done yet. One of my first big breaks, I think in my career I've had a number of big breaks. One of my first big breaks came from chemical weapons. When I was leaving the university, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, right? I was still trying to figure things out. At that time, Syria was using, the president of Syria at the time was using chemical weapons on the citizens, right? Now, there's a chemical weapons convention that says that if you have chemical weapons, you must be willing to destroy it, right? Syria's claimed they didn't have the money to destroy it, so there was a dilemma. I was just leaving uni. I had gotten a job with a big law firm in the UK, but I had 2 years to wait for my training contract to kick in. So I was figuring out what should I go do. And then I'd gone to speak at this conference, and a friend of mine, and a mentor figure, Dr. Femi Elias, probably one of the most senior international lawyers that is Nigerian, he told me, you know what, there's this opening in my organization. It starts as an internship position, but if you're interested, you can come through. And so I came through. And then I moved to The Hague. And I remember, interestingly, a law firm in Nigeria had offered me a job. They were going to give me a car, because I had a first class. They'll give me a car. They're going to give me a house. And I declined that to go and do an internship in The Hague. Now, for context, my internship was paying me 450 euros, and my rent per month was 300 euros. So I had to live on 150 euros a month, right? But this was one of my first big breaks. Because what happened was, I had to figure out, using law, how you can get the US and the UK to destroy chemical weapons stockpile for Syria without breaking the Chemical Weapons Convention. And we won the Nobel Peace Prize for that. And in a matter of months, my salary maybe 100x'd, right? Just because I went to try to do something that nobody else had tried. And so when we think of trade law, so many times people think about what has been done. The question is, what has not been done? What will the future look like? Right? Can we predict? Can we think about what patterns would exist? Can we think about what will change? We just saw ChatGPT should go live. Today, everybody in my company uses ChatGPT. Everybody. And why is this important for me? For the longest time, our biggest argument was that Africa's biggest power was that we are cheap labor. That changes. The technology gap between Africa and the world is widening with things like regenerative AI. Why? Because you are not cheaper labor than AI. You are not. I'm paying AI $10 a month. That is what? 7,000 naira a month. And it generates anything. And I can train it. That AI you saw was not trained. I can train it with specific information. I can tell it, act like a Nigerian lawyer born in Ogbomosho, 1995. And it will write like you. I can say, write inspiring language, and it will write like that. I can say, write like someone that just finished making a movie, and it will write like that. I can train it prompt. And this is just one. There's an AI company I just invested in. They can process things up to 10,000 pages in a second. The question is, what would the world look like? Now, the way the world would evolve, you would need law in those places. And that exactly is where the opportunity lies. That is how you make a lot of money. You make a lot of money because you go into a room that nobody knows what has been done, and you would have been the one. And that's why nobody can compete today. If I want to compete on oil and gas transaction, I cannot outcompete Templars. They've been doing it for years in Nigeria. But I know I can outcompete them on the AFCFTA. Well, why? Because it's new. I can outcompete them on AI law in Nigeria. You can domesticate, you can get niche specializations and make a lot of money in those places. And so, when I think of trade law, I think of it not just in buying and selling and what exists. I think of it in what will the future look like. I think of it as this AFCFTA we're all shouting, what would happen? What happens for small businesses? For instance, who's going to build that tool that would help the small businesswoman who is just a Instagram trader and wants to sell all across Africa to ensure that she doesn't get cheated in the agreements? Who's going to give her a sample contract? Who's going to help her with notarizations in a way that is automated? Who's going to build? And a lot of that is tech stacks. A lot of that is, and who's going to take the knowledge of the law and throw it? The AI today provides you an opportunity to try things you've never tried. Quick experiments. For instance, I know somebody who built a chat bot that is the personal assistant for you based on the AI on Telegram. The question is, what can we try that has not been tried? What are the fields that are going to exist? Who's going to buy? Who's going to sell? Right? What's going to happen with, for instance, when you think of all that's happening with unifying the currency, what's going to happen there? What's going to happen with yuan and naira trade? What new issues would that throw up? Today, one big things that big companies do is they take a loan in dollars, hedge against it, and take naira loans. What new issues does that throw up with the world? There's just so much that happens with trade. So much. And so the question is, where's the money? I can tell you where the money is today, but I can tell you that there's even more money to be made tomorrow. And you can write invoices for several millions of dollars, and people will pay you and beg you to take the money because you are the one who either has written about those things, or has thought about those things, or has formed an opinion about those things. So think about the future. Write. Put out your ideas on those things, because what happens is this. When people start to have these deliberations, they start to say, who has written about this issue before? Who has an idea about this issue before? Who has an opinion about this issue before? And then that's who they consult. And they'll call you into rooms and fly you out to places and say, can you give us your opinion on this thing? And that's actually how you make a lot of money, by creating value in the future. One of my favorite quotes is this: the best way to design the future, to predict the future, is to design it. Thank you.
I don't know whether we all appreciate how deep that content is. I mean, I think that this is what we are about. Sharing what we know from the depth of our hearts, and ensuring that no one is left behind. Think about the greatest things in the world, the richest men in the world. I mean, I was listening to two of them the other day, Steve Wozniak and Elon Musk, and I was shocked at what they were saying. They were reaching out to presidents all over the world to say, we need a break on AI. We need a moratorium. I don't know whether you guys heard that. That they want to go on a break for 6 months because the thing that they've created is now bigger than them. And that is the challenge that we all face. But just a little of that. You know, when he talks about imagining the future and he brings it down to a lawyer imagining the future, it's all about creativity. You know, Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, the creators of Facebook, everybody who is wealthy in the world today is wealthy because they provided a solution. And we should then be the wealthiest people because we are trained to provide solutions to everybody in the world. So thank you very much, Tola, for that very insightful response. I'll just go, I think we're running a bit out of time, but I'll say one thing very quickly, that when we talk about trade, you should all remember that we're talking about services, we're talking about intellectual property flow, we're also talking about works. So when I worked in England, what I knew was that if you have a 2 million naira brief that you're chasing, a 2 million pound brief that you were chasing, you had to go and apply through what they call the OJU, the official journal for procurement in Europe. So you're going to have a lot around competition for works advisory, for services advisory, for trade advisory. There's going to be an explosion on IP issues across the continent. So it's something I think that we all have to keep thinking about. So very quickly, before we get to the very last part, which is one I'm actually looking forward to. Kenneth, in 2 minutes, can you tell us, add to what you said before about the areas that people can explore and try and build competencies for work? Not the competencies, but the areas for work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. For me, I think about these things broadly, right? I see trade law as being part of international trade law as being part of the global economic and monetary system. And so personally, I like to describe it as international economic law, right? And I categorize work in that space into three. There's upstream, there's midstream, there's downstream. Now, upstream is policy formulation, right? Tola has spoken extensively about policy formulation, designing optimal policy systems, making sure governments understand what the policy frameworks are, and the policy frameworks that work best for them. Lawyers are involved in all of that. And I am saying that because I have been part of it. And Tola has also been part of it. So if you have the right skills and the right competencies, and you know the right people, you would also be part of policy formulation, right? Then midstream is where policy becomes law, right? The transmutation of policy into law, because you can't, policy by itself is usually ineffectual. It only starts to make sense when it has some legal force to it. And this happens on two levels when you're talking about international trade. There's the transnational level, which is drafting your AFCFTA, for example, and getting it signed, drafting your ECOWAS, revised ECOWAS treaty, drafting your CENSAR treaty, drafting the protocols, and getting them signed. That's what happens on the transnational level, transmuting them into law. Then the national level is domestication, depending on the country you're in. In Nigeria is easy, Section 12 of the Constitution, just domesticate. In Gambia, sometimes you need a referendum and a constitutional amendment. So depending on the country you're operating in, you look at what the Constitution or the operative laws say about transmuting legal instruments at the transnational level into binding legal instruments at the national level. And lawyers are involved in all of these things, whether advising the ECOWAS or the AU or at the UNECA, right? Or advising at the National Assembly, telling them how these things should be done and how they should be incorporated as brought into the corpus of Nigerian law. Then there's the downstream work, which is actually advising businesses and people and creating frameworks for them to take the benefit of those policies that have been designed and those legal frameworks that now exist. So if you can if you can develop the right skills and competencies, you can, earn from, you can exist within any of those spaces and earn from all of them. Now, in my own career, I've been privileged to do upstream work, I've been privileged to do midstream work, and I've also been privileged to do downstream work, right? And it's because you work hard, you develop the right competencies, you put yourself out there, right? Through COVID, it was COVID or shortly after COVID, I was doing the Bridge Fellowship under the NESG. The NESG is just an easy option for people who want to get into this space. The NESG has something called the Trade Policy Commission, right? And they are looking for people to work with them. They have the expert network, and they are looking for people. Every day they are looking for people to work with them. And when you get into that space and you work with them, they expose you to a lot of things, particularly around the connection between the upstream and the midstream, right? That connection between policy formulation and transmuting policy into law. The NESG does a lot of work around that. So if you are working with them and you make yourself available to work, and they do have a lot of work, you would realize that you would now start seeing how these things play out. And if you work hard enough, you'll be in rooms with people who actually make things happen. Rooms with people who actually make things happen. And then you start developing the right networks, right? For the upstream work that I've been privileged to do, I've been privileged to try to stop bilateralism, which is essentially on the heels of the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia, following the sanctions, Russia tried to have bilateral agreements with China and India to settle trade in rupees as opposed to going through the global multilateral payment system. Now, that type of bilateralism is bad for global trade, right? It's bad for the global economy, something that we termed at the IMF fragmentation, global economic fragmentation, which is bad. So we try to design policy frameworks that would make sure that does not happen at scale. And so some of us laugh when we see news reports talking about the rise of a new currency and the dollar's demise and all of that. Then at the midstream level, the work I've been privileged to do, particularly around my PhD research, has been designing optimal legal frameworks and policy frameworks and helping those who are responsible for drafting them at the WAMA, that's the West African Monetary Agency in Freetown, and the WAMI, the West African Monetary Institute in Ghana, Accra, Ghana, to rewrite the treaties that govern the one money side of the trade equation, right? To make sure that that happens, because if we get the one money side right, and the other regional economic communities get the one money side right, then we can now talk about building the one money market, the one market, one money by 2063, as we hope to do on the continent. Then on the downstream side, you talk to people who are trying to do businesses. I live in Abidjan now, and I've joined the Igbo community there because I'm Igbo. And then you get a lot of questions from our brothers who bring things as simple as stockfish from Nigeria. Things as simple as stockfish from Nigeria. And they have issues at the airport. And they ask you questions. And you have to answer the questions. Now, these things are going to happen at scale. And then in the work I do presently, trade facilitation, we provide financing. We have a trade facilitation program. It's a $1 billion facility that provides financing across different products. We have the trade finance line of credit, we have the trade guarantees, we have the soft commodity financing facility, which is exclusive to agricultural commodities. And then we have the risk participation agreement. All of these things are targeted at ensuring that we grow the scale and scope of inter-African trade under whether the AfCFTA, which is the continent-wide trade framework, or within the trade frameworks in each regional economic community, and then aggregate that to ensure that intra-African trade is a lot larger. So in any of these spaces, as long as you have the right skills and you have the right competencies and you have the right networks, because networks are also very critical. If you know it and you know it so well and nobody knows that you know it, then you keep it to yourself in your room, right? So knowing it and knowing it well and people knowing that you know it is incredibly important, right? I'll stop there for now.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. I think the tragic one is that when I'm eating my stockfish now, I'm thinking, what did the lawyer do to get it to come through? But it's okay. Somebody has got to earn their money. Oji, so very quickly, things like arbitration, online dispute resolution, all those kind of things that we can do. And then immediately the skills and competencies, how we acquire them, how we use them. If you can do that in 5 minutes, then Tola, you do yours in 5 minutes, skills, how we get into the market, how we do it. Kenneth, you also get ready for that. So Oji, closing round. And you can make your closing remarks with that.
Thank you, Tobina. In my saying my last words, I want to say, I want to give a fictional situation. So what I'm going to say is a work of fiction. Any relevance or resemblance with actual places should be, just take it as a fiction. Imagine that a company from South Africa that is into a company that does cable TV from South Africa has an office in Nigeria. And because they increased their prices, some students decided to go and picket their office, and there was a riot, and they actually destroyed their property. What they don't know is that Nigeria as a government signed an agreement with South African governments to protect South African businesses in Nigeria, so that if there is destruction of South African businesses, Nigeria will pay. Unknown to these Nigerian students who went to destroy those properties, Nigeria has signed that agreement. Unknown to Nigerian government officials, Nigeria has signed that agreement. Perhaps unknown to the South African business, there was such an agreement. And then after a while, what started as rumors spread out, and then a Nigerian lawyer then told the South African business, do you know that you have these rights? And then they go to somewhere called ICSID, and they file an arbitration claim against Nigeria. At the end of the day, the Nigerian government was asked to pay $1 billion. This is fiction. But believe it or not, it can easily happen. The largest award made by an arbitration tribunal was against Russia, UKOS and Russia. The amount involved was $50 billion. They are yet to enforce it. Russia has been fighting for over 10 years to enforce it. $70 million was what the law firm involved was paid to do the case for UKOS. That is just one instruction. I said to us earlier that through international trade, there are 3 potential disputes that can arise. Yes, I said $70 million. There are 3 potential disputes that can arise. Government versus government disputes can arise. Foreign investor versus government dispute can arise. And investor or business versus business dispute can arise. As a lawyer, if you study, as a dispute resolution practitioner, you don't even need to speak fancy English like Kenneth and Tola. You would know how to work for either the Nigerian government or the investor. And even if you're not paid $70 million, you might be paid 70 million naira. And believe it or not, that is not bad. So, just know that these areas exist. And you don't need to go to do a master's to even know. You just pick up the books, like the president said, with your phone. See, the knowledge, what we have out there, you can't finish studying it from now. There are online courses. You just need to read up. Pick up books and read, and you will see these areas. So, in ending, just know that disputes can arise in different areas. And if you are prepared, if you are equipped, you will tap in. That's one. Two, you can, if you don't want to work in a law firm or do disputes, you can do consultancy. You saw how embarrassing it was that Nigeria, after playing a huge part in formulating the AFCFTA, for about a year, we couldn't sign it. I don't want to trigger Tola. I know how you will feel. But Nigerian government need to be advised to say there's really nothing bad here. It might not be Nigerian government, it might be Sudan, it might be our next door neighbor, Togo. They will start thinking, maybe there's nobody in Togo that has that expertise. Who can we think of in Nigeria? And the person that comes to mind is they Google it and they will see somebody who has written about it and they call you. So just get yourself ready. That work will come. Lastly, if you don't want to work in Nigeria, there are lots of international organizations available around. You mentioned AFCFTA. Because we messed up, they had to situate their headquarters in Accra instead of Abuja or Lagos. We've lost that, but you can see work there. They have work there. You can work in World Bank. You can work in IMF. You can work in AFC, African Finance Corporation. They are organizations. So I can go on. It's something I can talk about from now to tomorrow morning, but unfortunately, we have to go. And I had 5 minutes. So final words, get yourself equipped, and this money we are looking for will come your way. Thank you.
Lawyers and their wahala. Oji just told us that Tola messed up and they took the thing to Ghana. Anyway, Tola, we know the brilliant work you did with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Skills, competencies required to get into this space.
For context, it was Uncle Dangote that didn't want us to sign. But, but that's a different conversation. No, it's public information now. Don't worry. Okay, skills. So it's a number of things. I think one is an understanding of the history and the foundational principles of trade law, right? So I said this: if you're going to try to do anything, especially on a global scale, you need to go back to what I call first principles, meaning what are really the foundational principles? What are they trying to solve? And the reason is because I think the biggest strength of a lawyer is not really in quoting the law. It's actually in what I call the way a lawyer thinks. So there are a number of times when I could be in a country and they'll be like, oh, there's this issue, and I'm like, I don't know what your law says, but I'm sure you would find some rules that say things like this. Let's check in this direction. And I think that's, and you know, when you're in uni and they make you learn legal theory, and you're like, why am I learning all these rubbish courses? Really, what they're teaching you is the way a lawyer thinks. There's a way a lawyer should think about an issue, whether you're thinking from principles, and so the first thing you want to do is get that sense about anything you want to go and specialize in, whether it's trade law, whether it's technology law. How does a lawyer think about this issue? What are the first principles about this issue? That's the first foundational thing you want. And the reason it's important is that one of my favorite persons, Yewande Sadiq, used to say, you want to learn the law so much that you can bend it without breaking it. Right? And so the way that happens is that you need to know the rules really well. What are the rules? What are the exceptions? Because the reason you'll charge somebody $1 million and somebody else will charge them $5,000 is because you know that law. They are really paying for that extra credential or that extra trust, right? And see, there's a lot of money to be made in law. King & Spalding basically does trade law, mostly. Last year, King & Spalding did $2 billion in revenue. So there's a lot of money to be made in trade law. A lot of money, right? But so, like I said, one is know it. Two is write, right? How do you get started? Write a lot. And the reason is that I think that trade law is a bit complicated, but the best things untangle themselves when you put your thoughts on paper. Write a lot. And the reason is that when you write, you will find out sometimes that, and I like to say write and get your friends to peer review it. Get it to people that you know that you respect in the field. Get involved in, create a community among yourself for the things you care about. That's one of the biggest things you can do. If you really care about trade law, what you want to ask yourself is that what are the leading players in trade law in the world? Follow them on Twitter if you have to follow them on Twitter. Follow the emerging issues on Twitter. Tag them. Have conversations. Because what that does for you is that it carries you to the conversation. One of my first ever breaks was somebody simply saying, I'd had a debate on someone on Twitter, and he DMs me and says, you did this. Do you want to come advise this tech company on this. And that was the brief, right? So put yourself out there. Don't be scared to put yourself out there, right? And I think that's important is get a community around yourself, people that already care about these things, that can encourage you, that can bring information to you that you don't know about, and all that. And I think it's important is critical thinking. And no, when you're a trade lawyer, you generally, like I said, it's a mixture of where politics and law meets. And so that means your opinion is not as strong as what your client's opinion is. So for instance, you represent a country that says, for instance, it could be a case where the president tells you, I want to close the border. Show me how I can legally close the border. Your work is not to say, I don't believe in border closure. Your work is to say, what exactly are the rules that allows us within, and I can give you a clear example. Under WTO law, Nigeria is not allowed to have a local content policy, period. We have one. We've had one for years. And each time we have to go and defend it at the WTO and why we have a local content policy. Yours is to find out what are the exceptions to those rules, what are the things I can do that can make. And so you need to be very critical in your thinking. And that goes back to having the first principle. Critical thinking is another important thing. Another thing I think is important is an ability to communicate your thoughts in the clearest way. And the reason is simple is this. And this, I say, practice a lot. Practice on even uncomplicated things. Lawyers are sometimes trained in school to be verbose in how we write. You know, the pontificate, your client just wants to solve his problem. Like when I used to write briefs for the vice president, it'll tell you there was a format. Because he would read in the car, he'll be going to his, but when you're writing speeches for him, he'll be reading in the car. He needs to be able to pick it and make quick notes and get a sense of what he can't be trying to Google words you are saying, right? And that's an intelligent. And the reason is because it's a complicated issue. You want to be able to give as much context as possible in very clear. So train yourself to write very lucidly. Sometimes what shows that someone is brilliant over the other person is not how much they know, it's how much they can communicate in lucid, simple terms to the most complicated. You would have clients that are ridiculously rich. They'll tell you, I want a 5-line opinion on this. 5-line. Go or no go. Simple. Go or no go. Simple. So that's another thing. Being able to communicate yourself in that way. I think 3 other things that I think are important, generally, broadly speaking, is one, an ability to build quality relationships. And this might not look like the technical thing, but it matters because most communities of technicalities are very small. People refer you to work, and a lot of it is being able to build quality relationships. And that looks like helping people. One thing I say is the easiest way to have mentors in this world is to offer value to someone ahead of you. Meaning, find somebody who you respect, who you trust, and offer value. If you offer value, you will get opportunities that you never. Every role I've taken, I did not qualify for them. What happened was I offered a lot of value early. It might mean helping draft things for free. I wrote legal opinions for free. I wrote, and what happens is that it opens a lot of doors for people to say, you know what, this guy knows something, come into the room. The last 2 things I would say, learn how to use technology to your advantage. Some lawyers work against technology. Work with technology. Meaning, how to use Google. And learn this in their prompts. There's a right way to do Google search. Right? What should you put in quotation marks? How does the software engine think about this issue? Right? And that's important. Learn how to use technology. If you know how to use technology to advantage, you will uncover opportunities that you will uncover information that you did not think was possible. Learn to use technology to your advantage. And the last thing I would say is, think of yourself as a global citizen. Too many times, it's easy to get stuck in where you're born, where you are, who your friends are, and think, when you write opinions, when you write advisory things, I remember when I was in uni, we had this classmate who, every question he asked, he would say, so if the world was like this, think in that way. And why is that important? It forces you to come upon new things that you would never have come upon otherwise. Meaning, consciously, when you write articles, don't write like you're only writing for people that are born, that don't have internet. Act as though you were a citizen. And that means the opportunities you apply for, in the things you try to do, reach out like you're a global citizen, right? Like, when I was in Cambridge, one of the reasons I wrote the thesis was because I wanted to be sure to myself that if I wrote an academic literature, it could stand the test of the most important standards anywhere in the world. So put yourself on those pedestals, put yourself to the highest possible standards. Why is that important? Because when you enter a room, you won't have to upskill. You're able to look at your old work and say, you know what, that's good enough. And the last thing I would say is this. You lose 100% of the opportunities you don't take. If an opportunity shows up, before you ask if I'm qualified for it, grab it. What most people do is you second guess yourself when opportunities show up because you're saying, maybe I'm not qualified for it. Grab it. Mr. Tobena will tell you this, but the first time I met Mr. Tobena, he asked me to write a research paper for him. And I was an area I did not know anything about. I said, you know what, send it across. I'll do it. If an opportunity comes, grab it first, and then go and find out to use technology on your advantage to get yourself to the best person in that room. Thank you.
Avail yourself of every opportunity you have in life. It may never come your way again. Thank you very much, Tola. Thank you. And I must say very quickly that when I spoke to Tola yesterday, he was still in Nairobi at the airport trying to make his way here just to be part of this session. I think we owe him a lot. So, very quickly now, Kenneth, before I call Charles, skills and competencies. Charles, you want to come up, but people are enjoying it now. They're not going on yet. Let them finish.
There's a part of myself that I thought I had left a long time ago, and when I used to teach at the law school, I'd like to focus on the core skills you require and where you'd find them. To enter the international trade law space, number one, we all did sales of goods here. Everybody here did sales of goods in the university. That is the foundation. Build on it. How do you build on it? Take out your phone, go on Udemy, go on Coursera, the World Bank OLC, on Citral. They all have free courses on international trade law. Foundational, intermediate, expert. And so you can systematically develop capacity in this space, right? And then when you develop that capacity, don't keep it to yourself. Share the knowledge. You learn better when you write, right? You learn better when you write. And I know this for a fact. You learn better when you write. You learn better when your knowledge is shared. And in my particular case, I learn best when I share it with people, right? So when you do that, you learn better and then you're able to improve. And then when you have your articles, I mentioned this last night, there's a law firm. I don't know anybody who works in that law firm, but I know the law firm. They are called Resolution Law Firm. And that's because they are essentially the young lawyer's best friend. They do research on everything, they write on everything, and they have them on Mondac, right? So young lawyers, when I was still at Templars, you give a junior associate work to do, and you do your own preliminary research. What they send to you is Resolution Law Firm's work, right? Because they go online to check, and then they pull out these resources, and then they have it available. Now, if I'm looking for somebody to quickly give me a page or two on something, I'm very likely to call someone from Resolution Law Firm because I know they do the work and they do it very fast. That is the kind of person you want to be. That is the kind of person I am. I write an article. I think 2 or 3 days ago, the one I did with Mr. Obiang that was published by Cambridge, I tagged Central Bank to it. Let them come and see it because I'm still hustling, right? So I tagged Central Bank to it. Come and see, we have written on the nonsense you've done. Come and give me work, right? So that is how we do it. So develop competence, systematically develop your competence, share it with people. When you use technology, a note of warning, use technology carefully. Let it enable your work, let it facilitate your work. Do not let it do your work. There are lawyers in New York today who are facing disciplinary action at the bar because they used ChatGPT to generate the motion, and ChatGPT was citing bogus cases that did not exist. So technology should help you. Do not let technology do your work. What clients are paying for is your ability to think, your ability to analyze, and your ability to create human solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, the panelists. We've run out of time, but I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as I did. I will now want to invite Charles Ajiboye to do the closing honors. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before I do the closing, 5 minutes. We cannot have Mr. President seated here. I will not steal from Uncle Dangote's hand. So put your hands together for Mr.
I'm still the chairman of the occasion. So, I want to speak from my heart and say, MBA Ikeja, this is the kind of law, this is the law we want to practice. Now, chairman of Law Week Planning Committee knows. I told you earlier, I asked him for this indulgence. Okay, so Kenneth is my, I don't know what to call him now, mentee, or he's one teaching me, I'm not sure. He worked with me in the corporate and commercial law department of Templars before, but he can't sit in one place. So now he's in Abidjan, working for the African Development Bank. Oji now works at Templars, but those of you who know, for the 2 years I was MBA president, he was a back office. Tola taught me anything I know about international trade law. Him. And we met some years ago, and Egbon, this is a new area. Everything I have learned about it, he taught me. Right? And I thought that we should come and sit here. It's not only international trade law, but this is just one of. On the 12th of July, a youngish lawyer called Olumide Babalola, he wrote a book on privacy, what the Nigerian courts have decided on privacy. Data protection, privacy. That is, let me tell you, gold mine for any lawyer. So we're launching the book on the 12th. I will send out to the branch to come and join us. We're launching the book on the 12th. Gold mine for data protection. I don't know if many of you know what the GDPR is. If the EU, even in Nigeria, NIDA came up with our own. Who came up with our rules? NDPR came up with our NDPR is our rules on data protection. It is so big, these areas. Potential. I was sitting down there. Tobina saw me on my phone. It's not Dangote I was chatting with. Let me give you expo. President Buhari has amended the constitution. States can generate power. How many of you realize that? Do you know what that means for us? What was I doing there? I was sending my law firm's article on that constitutional amendment to every new governor I know. That's what I was doing. If I don't know new governor, any attorney general that I suspect they are going to appoint, you know I'm the chief marketing officer of my firm. I was sitting down there, I'm telling you what I was doing. Everybody, any governor, Lagos State, immediately they heard governor, someone who has already put in place machinery. Every state wants to generate its own power. It's a no-brainer. Now, since 1999, my law firm, we have worked in the power space. We bumped into it accidentally, but we work in power. But it's not a big deal. You can pick up the books and start reading it now. Because if every state wants to generate power, the first thing they need to do is that the architecture, everything that exists at federal, must be replicated first. The framework from law to what they call them, regulator. What do NERC? What you know as NERC in national, there must be CERC in states, right? The whole value chain that exists in national must exist in 36 states. At least you can be sure that the ones that have gas close to them are the first that will start immediately. Then those who have plenty sunlight, they will be doing renewable. But there's a revolution about to take place in the power sector. What are the lawyers doing? When I was on the Council of Legal Education, my friend, the DG, we are very good friends, but he's always defensive when I tell him, we must be nimble in the way we teach law. So that you can open at the university level and at the law school level. I've just told you now, we've talked today about international trade law. You have heard about technology law. I've told you about data protection. chairman of the branch, we must let our people know. If 3-4 people take one side, go. Agwebo don't take this side, go that side. By the time we come back for end of year, nobody will be begging any law firm to come and contribute to the branch now. Everybody go tired. So I wanted to just let you understand why we wanted to put this together. Tobena and I were kindred spirits. We believe in. I just said, let us come and talk to our branch about this. It so happens to be chairman of our MBA ICLE. So I said, we'll put him here so that we can put him on the spot, so that he can collaborate with this branch to ensure that if it's virtual, if it's physical, keep the pipeline flowing. Make una not tire for the training. Oh. They are critical. They are so it is money in your hands. Only say you just need to blow small powder on top. It will turn to money. I promise you. So, in conclusion, I want to ask each of the 3 speakers, because for trade law, one of the best books I am told around that can quickly tell you about international trade law is called the Oxford Handbook on International Trade Law. Oxford, quickly you can learn it. And so I've ordered 3 copies because it's not available in Nigeria. So I've ordered it, they bring and come. So speaker 1, 2, and 3 will ask a question, and whoever gets it right, each person will get 1 book, 1 copy of the book. So everybody, on your marks. So Oji has a question.
Ready question.
Huh?
Ready question.
Ready question. Oji has a question. So I will let Charles conduct it. I'm going back to my seat in case I can answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We need to quickly draft the law. I want to know whether I am also... No, he has not said that. That's not part of the law. The international trade agreement was just drafted. Does not exclude me from being part of the answer and question and answer. Did you say no, sir, or yes, sir? No. No, I didn't say no. Thank you very much. Very quickly, before we go into that Q&A, I want to recognize 2 national officers of the Nigerian Bar Association who are here with us. We have the 3rd Vice President of the Nigerian Bar Association, Mrs. Mandy Asagba, a member of this branch. And then my own immediate Oga, the Publicity Secretary of the Nigerian Bar Association, Mr. Abib Akorede Lawal. He's not of this branch originally. When he was campaigning, he said he was, but he's visiting now. He came to make money in the tribunal. I want to beg you to allow me have Tola ask his question first, and immediately he drops that question, we would allow him to exit, and then we'll continue. Is your question ready?
So, they say that when you see a gun do something, you follow. So I don't have any questions. I'll just match with 3 extra books.
Wow. 6 books now. Okay now. Thanks so much. Thanks so very much. Please, just before you go, Tola, somebody may want to reach you after now on social media. Maybe not your phone number. To reach you, sir, is more difficult than to reach Tinubu.
On every social media platform, it's Adetola OV.
Adetola
OV. Just
0 O and V.
Just O and V at the end.
On LinkedIn, everywhere. Can we have a group photograph before you go? Just quickly.
Well, I think I just want to quickly say this on behalf of the branch and the Law Week Committee, that these gentlemen have done us a great deal of favor. In case you are not aware, and I must thank Mr. Olumide Akpata, this session did not cost us a dime. You can imagine if we are to fly them in to come and make this presentation, and they will have tasked us, this is how much they charge. Because when you work at international level, you charge hourly. And I have a feeling we probably will have had to take a mortgage on our branch and ask for a 10-year period to pay back. So I want to say, and some of you have been given some facts. You see, Ikeja branch on it. The money came from his purse. And truly speaking, what we've learned and heard this afternoon, you will know that they emphasized it, and I'm glad they did, because most times the problem with that, we are looking for shortcuts. They continually stress the fact that the right competencies are key, the quality network is key, and that if you work hard, because this is where the challenge lies. A number of us would rather spend 30 days on one mountain wanting to become millionaires. But they'll be very, very direct. You've got to learn the right competencies and build the right network. And so that if you do that, maybe in the next the law week in 2025, one of you will sponsor it. Thank you.
Let's have a group photograph just before you go, please. Mr. President, Mr. Chairman of the branch, Chairman of the committee. After this, we have national officers, then national officers and branch executives, and then committee members with senior members of the bar. Can we have the branch schools very quickly? So we're going to start quickly with the Q&A. 6 books to go. We have an extra 3 books now. That means we have 6 books. And then immediately after that, we are bringing this. They have not asked the question. Oji is going to throw the first question. We're probably going to make them 2 questions. What's the first question? Members of the committee, are they here as well? Yeah. You are not taking. No, you can come.
Okay, so 2 quick questions from me. Question 1: What year did the AFCFTA enter into force?
First hand up.
What year did the AFCFTA enter into force? I expect a hand up without looking at the.
You are using Google.
No, Google.
If I catch you with phone, I will disqualify your answer. Don't ask ChatGPT.
There's a hand, sir.
Okay, let me ask the man beside the column.
There's a hand up here.
2020.
And that option?
Sir, Mr. Debayo. What year? 2020 as well. Does that satisfy you?
No, sir.
No, sir. Can I? Okay, let me take you.
No.
Enter
into force. Yes. Not when Nigeria signed it. So, a treaty enters into effect when a number of states have signed it, depending on the agreement. In the case of AFCFTA, 24 countries needed to sign it. And 24 states, or 24. What year? I wanted to say what month, but it's on 30th of May. 2000, should I? Okay.
No, not
so
any other person.
The answer is 2019.
What's
so I'll go to the next question.
Oh, the answer is 2019.
2019.
Okay.
Second question. What law did President Tinubu sign into? What act did President Tinubu sign in the past 24 hours?
Wait. Too many hands. No, not this. Let me. No female.
Someone's in there. That's not what I had in mind. That's correct, but that's not what I had in mind. That's correct.
Unification. Is this unification of retirement ages? Eh? Was that the answer we expected?
Yeah.
Or was that the only act that was
That was
signed?
that was not the act I had in mind, but he's correct because the president signed the law. Okay, say he's not a young lawyer. Okay, what other law affecting the power sector did President Tinubu sign
Within the last 24 hours.
within the last 24 hours? Yes. Going.
Okay. There's a lady.
Answer.
Okay, let's have you.
Yes, please.
Oh, you know, I said you should not stay behind the second column, but I'll come back to you. Oh, yeah. Speak up.
Electricity
The
Act
Electricity Act.
was signed today. Correct.
So we'll give you the first half of the book, second half of the book. We can't share the book. Oh.
No, he answered. Because I didn't want him to answer. I didn't want.
So how do we do it now?
Book number 1. Yes.
Book number 1. What about the first? What about this?
He's not a young lawyer.
Mr. President has overruled you. Sorry. Champagne. Black's law. I don't know they use. Please, where is he? Somebody in the committee should take that name so that I will not forget. Somebody in the committee should take the record. Where is book number 1, sir? Mr. Eru. There was no clause. So there was no clause. So. Going forward, non-young lawyers will be excluded, but that was not part of the clause before. So let Mr. Otobo have his own, and then the second. From here, no more. But he has the first, he has the second. Committee members should please take note. Who is taking the committee members? Name and phone number. Where is Rotimi? Please help us now. Okay, third question. Let Kenneth shoot that. We'll come back to Oji now. Please don't rush and answer question. Let me call you. Calm down, answer the question. Can I have one of the ushers help with this microphone so that you just take the mic to the person?
What is the name of the proposed West African single currency?
What is the name of the proposed
West African single currency?
Proposed West African single currency. Name of proposed West African single currency. Name of proposed West African single currency. Stop asking ChatGPT. Stop asking Google. What is the name? 1, 2. Mr. Adebayo. A round of applause for him. But we said two senior lawyers will not have a gift. So thank you for the answer, but there will be no gift for you, sir.
So Mr. Adebayo, book 3, right? Who answered it? Larry now. Yes, sir, book 3. It's okay. It's okay. Next question.
Next question
from me.
Okay, sure.
The Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area has been, the secretariat has been established. Somebody here mentioned where it is located. I have it's two questions in one. Firstly, who is the Secretary General? Then tell me where it's located. It is so you get sense.
Okay, any answer for book 4? Any answer for book 4? 2 legs now. Who is the Secretary General? Oh yeah, now. I'm sure there are a lot of people that have never ever used this ChatGPT before. The time it takes to get an answer is longer than the time it takes for Google to respond. Okay, what is it? Is that what? Somebody should raise up and stand up and answer the question now. Let me take the lady on white. The lady on white. Let me take the lady on white. You don't know the answer. The lady on white. Wait, you said, wait, now it's me that is calling people to answer now. It's when I call you, you answer. The lady don't even know the answer. Okay, sit down. Another person.
It takes too. It has taken too long, and we know. So at least even if you are using technology, be quick about it. So we have cancelled the question. So let me ask one now. Agenda 2063. What is that?
Oh yeah, let me have your answer.
One market, one money.
Is it? He got it.
This gentleman is going to study his MBA, so he needs the book now.
Okay, let's have Mr. Tobina. Book number 4. We have 2 more questions to go.
Okay, you do the last question. Well, I'll ask a question that concerns me. What is the YouTube channel of the MBA ICLE?
The YouTube channel
of the MBA ICLE. Institute of Continuing Legal Education.
So just to make the point, all the trainings organized by the MBA ICLE is stored on a YouTube channel. You can view it anytime, any day. So what is that channel? Do a lot of advert around.
Only 5 seconds. 1, 2. Okay, sister, what's your name? Huh? MBA ICLE training. Where did you see that one?
Is that correct? No.
What's your own now?
No. That's what
DJ has answered 2 questions correctly. Walai. No, that question should have gone. They would have checked YouTube and seen it by now. Oh, yeah, let's hear you. Correct.
Okay.
Who is answering? MBA underscore ICLE. No. He said MBA ICLE. Okay, book number 5.
No.
Nebo.
Okay, last question.
Last question.
Last question. No Google. Last question. Yes.
Book number 5. So this is the last question. Rotimi, somebody has taken down the names of the 5 of them. Okay.
Last question. No Google. What month and year did Mr. Olumide Akpata hand over as MBA president? What month and year? It's simple. What day? Okay, what day, month and year? What day, month and year did Mr. Olumide Akpata hand over as MBA president?
What
day, month,
Optimist.
year?
You want to try?
What day? What date? What date? Date, month and year?
What day, month, and year? Oh yeah, let's hear you. August when? August, face front. Don't answer again. You are looking back. August 2022. What day, month, and year? Go and sit down. August 28th August 2022. Cancel. Question is off the table. Another question.
It's on the table now. Another question.
Too many chorus answers.
Too many chorus answers.
You still want to answer it again? Oh, yeah, give us another question. Anybody with the correct answer? Okay, let's have you. 28th August 2022.
What is it?
It's not 27, it's not 28. Too. It's not 27, it's not 28. Go and sit down. It's not 31st. It's what? 26. Hey, so you're echoing it. So who will get the book? Let's have another question that will help us get a clear winner. Okay, let's go ahead and just ask the last question. But stop chorusing answers now.
What N
One house, kulu kulu. Go and sit down.
what NBA ICLE training is currently ongoing?
Background, that one is easy. Just raise your hand and answer quickly. What is it? Corporate restructuring, is that the full something? At least they tried. I think we should. Okay. Who is that? Who wants to try? Oh, yeah, try. Okay. Oh. What is a corporate restructuring again? That's what he said. What's the one? The ongoing training of the NBA ICLE. They are on day 2 now. Corporate restructuring. But you are not a young lawyer again, no. She's correct. Corporate restructuring and insolvency. That's it. But maybe we should just give her. All right. I want to say a big thank you to every one of us. The participation has been amazing, and the session has been enriching. Thank you so very much, Mr. Erojikwe. Thank you for how you moderated the session. Thank you for the depth you provided. Oji, Kenneth, thank you very much. All I was hearing as you were talking was money, money, money. My blood pressure was increasing. I was hearing $70-something million. No, I said something million naira. Those are the kind of things I like to hear. I'm not sure if anybody here is going to take actions with this, but I hope that you will. In another 1 or 2 hours, we will be starting the opening cocktail. And then I just trust you are not going to miss it. We are going to transform this place into a mini clubhouse now. And then the cocktail is going to be as awesome. In fact, the words that we use as young lawyers is always going to be mad. So when you come in, you are going to say mad. Oh. So I hope you get ready for the cocktail. We're going to have a cocktail after now. And it's going to be a great time. So for all those that are... Wait, there are supposed to be 6 names here. We must have omitted one. Let's quickly clear it. We have Mr. Otobo, Mr. Ekena, Mr. Taiwo David, K.O. Adebayo, Abiodun Kolawole. Who did we not write your name? This is village people. There were 6 people. Who is the 6th person? We have 5 names here. Okay, the question was cancelled. So we still have 1 free book. What program is happening on Wednesday of the law week? Which Wednesday? This Wednesday. What program is happening on Wednesday, this law week? You are chorusing answer. What program is happening on Tuesday? Raise up your hand. Okay, no, let's go. Tuesday. What program is on Tuesday? Aerobics, no. Tuesday. Stop echoing. I want to give out the last book very quickly. The books will be delivered, will be distributed during the Speedel conference. Mr. Olumide Apata, we have a session there on the 22nd. So come for Speedel conference on 22nd. You would get the book. Hopefully the book would have arrived by then. Okay, the president will bring them. Okay, he will bring the books himself. The chairman of the branch will determine who gets the last book. I don't tire. Let me invite the chairman for a vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Charles. It's been a very wonderful time with Mr. Tobina and our distinguished guests here. Thank you very much. We cannot thank you enough. Mr. President, you know how we do it now. You know, I can always go to sleep. I'm very sure. You never failed me before. Please, let's appreciate Mr. Olumide Apata. This president, unfortunately, there is no time to talk about him. Not because he's here, but he's truly a good leader. Mr. President, God will honor you. You know, I want to tell you quickly before we round up that at the Ganifa Emi annual lecture, we came in on the 19th, we had the lecture on the 15th. So while we were struggling with the hall, I did not know that Mr. President had commissioned someone to brand the hall. So I was here trying to reach him, and I was calling him. So when I called him and he finally picked and he said, Mr. Chairman, what's the problem? I said, Mr. President, you know, you send somebody to come and talk to me. The big way the guy they give us. He said, President, he said, Chairman, you dey fall my hand. Oh. He said, the Gani Fawemi annual lecture is a signature program of the Nigerian Bar Association in Ikeja branch. Mr. President, what you demonstrated is that you are not just a member of the Lagos branch, you are a member of the Nigerian Bar Association. And we are indebted to you. And you have done that today again. You know, when we're talking at this, at the various levels, committee levels, and, you know, I was just confident. I know say you go perform now, my president. And you did. Thank you very much. So the last book will stay at the library of the Nigerian Bar Association Ikeja branch. And I've also gotten the nod of Mr. Olumide Akpata. We'll be having a training here, and I will discuss the modalities with my friend, Mr. Tobena here, before he leaves. Another wonderful man. Please put your hands together for him. A friend of the bar. And, you know, he calls regularly to find out not how I am faring, but how the CLE committee of the branch is faring. And so we'll be bringing you in July. We have agreed July, sir. Thank you very much. So I want to thank you all. We're just getting started. They will attend, Mr. President. They will. They will attend. Thank you very much, sir. So we go into the next session. No, we have what? Cocktail. So thank you very much for coming. We wish to see you in the next few minutes. By 6, we're going to the cocktail. And I want to thank the chairman of the committee, the learned senior advocate, Mr. Tunde Adejuyibe, and also all the members of the Law with Planning Committee, and of course, the branch for giving us the opportunity to serve them in this capacity. Thank you very much. You're welcome.